Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, or whatever the time of the day or night it is that you're tuning into First Report. Today with me, I've got our Maori Affairs spokesperson, the Honourable Shane Jones. Great to be in your office today, Shane.
Kia ora, mate. Yep, no, it's very airy.
Yeah.
There's always a little bit of whitewater lapping around the political shore that I stand upon, but all ka pai.
Beautiful. Now, I've come to speak to you today about your contribution on behalf of New Zealand First yesterday around Rino Tirakatini's Members' Bill, which is the Canterbury Regional Council's Ngai Tahu Representation Bill. Can you give us a bit of a background on that?
Well, look, first, our caucus has got a great deal of personal affection for Rino Tirakatini. You may know that his auntie, his grandfather, they're all politicians, and they're from a leading Ngai Tahu whānau. Now, the Ngai Tahu tribe is an incredibly well-endowed tribe, and our caucus is quite clear that not only do we not support designated Māori seats for this regional council, we don't think it's necessary for the Ngai Tahu tribe. They've done extraordinarily well since they did their settlement. They are entitled to 17% of all future settlements that go over the $1 billion figure set by Jim Bolger. Well, Jim Bolger, when he first did the treaty deals in the early 1990s, he promised the Ngai Tahu that they'd get 17% of everyone else's settlement over $1 billion. So look,
they call that relativity clause.
Yeah, they call that the relativity clause, and I don't want to put everyone to sleep banging on about it. But the Ngai Tahu people, they may have been disappointed, but this is a political principle, and the caucus has clearly stated we will not brook any more creeping in this direction. I've had lots of positive feedback. A few of the iwi raise their eyebrows, but basically they say, hey, this is politics. And the New Zealand First policy is quite clear, and they're not going to tolerate any of it. And I sort of feel that the regional council, they don't hold sovereignty. The New Zealand government, the Crown holds sovereignty. So if Ngai Tahu wants to engage with the sovereign powers, they don't engage with the regional council, they engage with central government.
And something you spoke about yesterday when you were delivering your speech, you talked about their representation on any board, whether it be council or even here in Parliament, using the democratic process and using their powers to be within the community to actually find the right person to stand up, and that's an important part of democracy throughout the world, but also what New Zealand First strongly believes. And so, can you give us a bit
I mean, the reality is that if the regional council down in Christchurch want to engage more effectively with the local tribe, because they feel they have legislative provisions that require them to do so, then get out and do your job.
Yeah.
Don't expect us to agree that we plonk someone from Ngai Tahu, an incredibly well-endowed tribe, on a directly elected democratic body. It doesn't work like that.
Here. Now, the other point I'd like to raise is the RMA. Under the previous government, Nick Smith talked about trying to simplify the RMA, but in doing so has seriously complicated it. And I know in Rino Tirakatini's speech he talked about the obligations under the RMA now to have iwi participation agreements. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, the RMA was passed by Simon Upton in 1991. And there are a host of provisions in that piece of legislation that recognise Māori sacred sites, sites of ancestral significance, and all fair-minded Kiwis are up for that. But where we draw the line, I'm absolutely sure, is continually dividing us in terms of local and regional government. Now, the Resource Management Act has become hideously complicated. Nick Smith worsened it with his half-baked ideas called the Hono Hono Agreement. And we don't like them, we want them disestablished. And I actually feel that there's a case for central government making more of these critically important economic decisions. For example, we have matters pertaining to the future of aquaculture down there in Marlborough. And the longer that they swirl around down at the local and regional level, the less is happening.
And that has a huge impact and a flow-on effect, because of course those costs get capitalised and put onto the consumers in many cases, and particularly when we're talking about the RMA and trying to get land availability, the cost put onto those local landholders that are trying to develop land, because of the complexities and the cost structures of the bureaucratic nonsense that goes on, we've got to do something about that. So we won't say too much more about that. We'll get back to that on another subject, but I know you're a busy man. You've got a big day ahead. You've got some announcements coming up.
No, I'm going to support our leader, Winston Peters. We're going to the north. We're going to the Hokianga Harbour. a harbour that unfortunately has become degraded as a consequence of poor land use decisions. So we're going to work with the farmers, the landowners, to plant more trees, right tree, right time, right place. And I have to say what NZ First has managed to deliver in the context of our coalition government in relation to forestry is truly transformational. 1 billion trees, more investment in processing. Indeed, I've been told recently that New Zealand's richest man, Mr. Graham Hart, even he himself, and he watches his pennies or he wouldn't be so rich, he himself is investing in processing. So there are lots of exciting things there happening, and it's a demonstration that although we may have only got 7% of the vote, we have our finger on the pulse that leads to transformational change.
Thanks for joining us today, and we'll get you back on the show again soon. Thanks very much.